A single vote in the U.S. Senate can freeze the most powerful government on earth.
Handing out official
But right now,
diplomas to students
a political
6,000 miles
standoff
away
threatens to
who
blow up
have
the rules
never
forever.
even stepped
we are
foot
watching
in an
the
American
fundamental
classroom.
machinery
I mean,
of
it sounds
American
completely
lawmaking
fabricated, right?
just
But
grind to
a
an
massive
absolute halt.
1,000-page
And honestly,
state
the physical
audit
toll on the
just
people
hit the
inside
Val
that building
Verde
is
and
about to
San
become
Jose
very
Unified School
real.
Districts.
Right, so let's set the scene.
It's
March
the details are
2026.
just staggering.
Picture the
Yeah,
hallways
they
of the
really
United
are.
States Capitol.
Auditors uncovered this scheme where
Aides are
roughly
literally
150
dragging
international
military-style
students got
cots
unauthorized
into back
California high
offices.
school diplomas.
Oh, yeah.
We're
Staffers
looking
are
at
stockpiling energy
potential
drinks for the
fraud.
case.
Exactly.
Triggering,
We are looking at a scenario where
up to
senators might
$180
actively
million
refuse to
in
drink
taxpayer
water.
funding.
Up to
just so they don't have to
180
leave the
million,
floor to
wow.
use the
And the
restroom.
fallout
Which
from
is
this is
moving
wild,
incredibly
and it's
fast,
all
too.
because the
Oh,
Senate
absolutely.
is
Investigations by the
deadlocked
district attorney,
over
the
state
Save
controller,
America
and the
Act.
state
Right, that big
superintendent
election
are actively
overhaul
underway
bill.
right
Yeah.
now.
It's centered
So
around
welcome to
measures like
today's
voter
deep
ID
dive.
requirements.
It's a crazy one today.
Democrats
It really
are
is. We are
aggressively blocking
unpacking
this
how this
legislation,
international
and
diploma
Republicans
pipeline
desperately want
actually
passage.
functioned,
But they
who
lack
pulled
the
the
60
strings,
votes
and
required to
what
break
this
the
means for the
stalemate.
value of an
Which
education.
means
Right, because
frustrations
that's the
are
real
just
core issue
boiling
here.
over.
Exactly. And look,
Today,
before
you
we
have
jump
28
in, looking at our
Republican
stack of
senators, people like
sources
Pete
today,
Ricketts and
the
Cynthia
political
Lummis,
commentary
demanding
is red hot.
that the Senate
Yeah,
force
it's definitely
a
stirred up a
grueling,
lot of anger.
physical,
It has.
talking
Outlets like
filibuster.
Next
They
News
want to
Network
force
and Town Hall
Democrats
News
to
are
stand on
calling
the
this,
floor and
quote,
talk until their
America
vocal
last
cords just give
corruption.
out. And if that
They're
fails,
claiming
they want to break the
bureaucrats
standing rules
basically
of the
sold
Senate
out American
entirely
kids
to
to
force
form
a final
governments.
vote.
Which is a
And the
very
real
strong
shocker dropped
accusation.
Yeah, and a very
just a few
strong
days ago.
accusation.
Senator
But I want to
John
be super
Cornyn,
clear with you
a man
listening.
who
We are
fiercely
not
defended the
here
old Senate
to play
rules for his
politics
entire
or
career,
endorse those specific
just published
viewpoints.
this
Right.
We're not taking
Fiery
sides
op-ed.
here.
No,
Right,
not at
saying
all. We
Republicans
want to
must
look past
act now
that
to get
partisan
this
outrage
outrage
and
Yeah,
focus
he said
strictly
they had
on
to
the
deal
math,
a fatal
the mechanics
blow
of
to
the
the
audit,
rules,
and
which instantly
why this
triggered a
matters
massive
to the
public call out
educational
from former
system as a
Senator
whole.
Joe
And
Manchin.
honestly, the
Manchin
mechanics are where
slammed
this
Cornyn
story
online
becomes,
for, well,
truly
a
a
massive
unbelievable.
flip-flop.
Right.
Because the rules
Tell
of
us
the
how this
Senate
actually
are
works.
quite literally
So,
hanging by a
Val
thread
Verde
right
Unified
now. I mean, the
formed what they
decisions made
called
in
a
the next
sister
few days
school
will dictate
partnership.
how American
Okay.
laws are written for
And
the
this
next
was with a
century.
private boarding school
Welcome to this deep
in
dive.
Qingdao, China.
Today, we
called the
have a
Pegasus
custom mission
California
tailored
School.
just
Which,
for you.
just hearing sister
We're
school,
going to
I think
explore
of
the
like a few
swashbuckling,
exchange
pirate-filled
students.
origins
Exactly.
of the
Normally,
filibuster.
a sister
It
school
is a
arrangement
crazy
involves
history.
It really
some
is.
cultural learning.
We'll also break down
programs,
the
right?
Yeah, or
terrifying
shared
parliamentary
language classes,
weapon known
a
as
few
the
pen
nuclear
pals and a
option.
video call once
And
a
finally,
semester.
we
That
will
is the
unpack a
standard setup.
mind-bending
you'd expect.
mathematical
But
concept
Pegasus took
called
that
the
concept
Mansion
and
Paradox.
just
Right,
weaponized
which
it
proves
for
exactly why
college
politicians use
Organized
gridlock as a
how?
highly
Well,
calculated
they marketed their
mathematical
school to
strategy.
wealthy Chinese
So,
families.
By the end of
as
this conversation,
guaranteed gateway
you will hold
to the
the
United
secret
States
decoder
public
ring
education
for the
system.
chaos you
Guaranteed,
see on
like
the news.
a literal
You will
guarantee.
understand
Literal
the hidden
money-back
gain
guarantee.
theory
If you pay their
that
tuition,
drives
they
these
promise
high-stakes
admission to a
showdowns.
top
Absolutely.
100
Okay,
American
let's unpack
universities,
this.
where they
Before
would
we
just
can truly
refund
grasp the
Right. A
physical
money-back
threats and the
guarantee for
massive
college
stakes
admission is
of this
something not a
2026
single high
FZV
school in the United
America
States
Act
could
standoff.
honestly offer a local
We
student.
really need to look
Not
at
a
what the
chance.
filibuster
So guaranteeing
actually is.
entry
And
to
more
a top
importantly,
100
how it
university
started.
implies they had
because
a
it wasn't
foolproof
designed this way
system.
by
They
the
did have a
founders,
system.
right?
Right.
Like this wasn't
and it
in the
relied
blueprint.
entirely
Not at all.
on Val
If you read
Verde.
the U.S.
The
Constitution, you will
California
not find the
district.
word filibuster
Exactly.
anywhere in the text.
The California
Wow,
School
nowhere.
District issued
Nowhere.
official high
The
school
Constitution
diplomas,
basically gives the
complete
Senate
with
the
the district
authority to
seal
set its own
and the
internal
superintendent's
rules.
signature
So back in
to the
1789,
graduates
during
of
the
this
very first
Pegasus school
sessions,
in China.
debates ended
Okay,
with
let's
just a
unpack the
simple majority
logistics of
vote.
that.
It's
Okay,
wild.
so
It's like
51
buying a
votes and you're
VIP
done.
backstage
Exactly.
pass from
But
a
there was
shady
this
scalper,
massive loophole.
but the pass
They
is actually
never
printed and
codified a
signed by the
specific
real
procedure to
concert
force
promoter.
a vote
That is
to
a perfect
happen
way to put it.
If someone
But how does a
simply
public
refused
school
to stop
legally
talking.
justify printing
So without a
state-certified
mechanism to cut off
credentials for
debate,
kids who aren't physically in their
Politicians
zip
figured out they
code,
could
let
just,
alone the country?
hold the floor hostage.
Right, well, the justification
They did.
hinges on
We
how
actually
public
have
schools are
diaries from the
funded.
very first session of
And the
Senate.
mechanism at play here is
Pennsylvania
called
Senator
average
William
daily
McClay wrote down
attendance,
his sheer
or
frustration that
ADA.
senators from Okay.
In
Virginia were
California,
intentionally
public
talking
schools
away the
receive
clock.
state funding
Just to make
based
sure
on their
specific
ADA.
bill couldn't pass.
So every time a
Right.
student
They
sits in a
literally
seat for a day,
weaponized the
the
clock.
state sends
if they were holding the
specific amount of
legislative process
taxpayer money
hostage,
to
it
that
makes perfect
district
sense why the
to
press
fund its
eventually
eventually started calling them
So the more
pirates.
students you have
Which brings us to
officially
the
enrolled and
actual word
attending, the bigger
filibuster.
your budget.
Yeah, it's easily one of the
Think of AD
strangest words
funding
in
like a
American
restaurant
politics.
So where
charging the
does it
city
come
for
from?
every customer who
The
walks in the
etymology
door.
is fascinating, honestly.
Val Verde
the term really
essentially
took hold
set
in
up
the
a drive-through
1850s.
window in China.
It comes from the
handed
Dutch
out
word
receipts to people who
freebooter
never ate there
and the Spanish
billed the
word
city of California for the
filibustero,
meals.
Which translates
That is
directly to freebooter
exactly
or
what
pirate.
happened.
And
Yes.
that mechanism is what auditors
Specifically,
are calling
the
phantom
mercenaries and
enrollment.
pirates
Phantom
who
enrollment.
raided
Yeah.
Caribbean islands
The district
and Latin American
allegedly
countries
put
during
these
that era.
overseas
So they were
students
calling these
into their
distinguished
official computer
senators
systems
pirates.
as if they
Pretty
were
much.
actually attending
The
classes
term
in
entered the
California.
political
Even though they were
lexicon because
6,000 miles
observers
away.
recognized
By
the
coding them
behavior.
into the state's attendance
Senators who
software,
talked for
they
hours
generated this
were
paper trail
literally
of
hijacking
attendance
the Senate
without
floor.
any
Like
physical
taking the
presence
government
at all.
hostage, just like a pirate
And
taking
that allowed
over
the
a ship.
district to claim state funding
So
for
let's
them.
track how the
Exactly.
Senate tried to fight off these
millions of
legislative
dollars.
pirates.
The audit points
Because as
to
the country
potential
grew,
$180
you couldn't just have one
in
person
fraudulent
shut down the
taxpayer
entire
funding
government
over
for
the
weeks
years.
on end.
No, you couldn't. But it took a long time
That's
to build a
just
defense. By the
massive amount
early
of money.
20th
It's huge.
century, these
But
marathon
the district's
speeches
general
became
fund wasn't the
catastrophic for
only
a
thing
modernizing
benefiting
nation.
from this arrangement,
imagine.
right?
So finally,
Because
in
the sources
1917,
mentioned some
President
pretty
Woodrow
serious
Wilson
personal
pushed
perks
the Senate
for
to adopt
the
Rule
teachers
22.
and staff involved.
Oh, yeah.
This rule created a
personal
formal
perks were
process
substantial.
called cloture,
Cloture.
Val Verde
Yeah.
teachers were
which is
actively
simply a mechanism to
incentivized
force an entity
to travel to
pay.
China
But here's
and
the
teach
catch.
at this Pegasus
It required a
Incentivized
massive
how?
two-thirds
Well,
majority vote
They
to
received
trigger.
free,
Two-thirds, wow.
fully
Which is an
furnished
incredibly
apartments
steep
in
hill to
China.
climb, for
So
starters.
stiff
Free rent.
that over the next
Nice.
4
Right.
decades,
And
the
they were
Senate
given a
only managed to
guarantee that
successfully
they could
invoke
keep their
cloture
United
5
States
times.
jobs when they returned.
That is
Okay,
wild.
so safety
Yeah.
net. Southern
Plus,
senators
the audit even
famously
found they were
used this
given
exact tool
improper
to block
salary
civil rights
increases
legislation
upon
for
returning to their
years.
California
The
jobs
gridlock grew
after
so
taking
intense
these
that in
supposedly unpaid
1975,
leaves of
the
absence.
Senate
Wait,
lowered
hold
that
on.
threshold from
If teachers are
two-thirds
getting
down to
free rent in
60
China
out
and
of the
bringing home
100
bigger
paychecks
paychecks
upon their
senators.
return, the
Ah,
public
okay.
pool of
And that
resources
60 vote
is footing
threshold
that
is the
bill.
number that
Exactly.
dominates our
California
politics today.
taxpayers
Exactly.
essentially paid
But
for
here's
teachers
where I
who
think
inflated
a lot of people
California's
get
salary,
confused.
while
When
that
we hear
teacher
the word
lived in a free
filibuster,
apartment in China.
we don't
Working
just
for
think
a
of a
private
60 vote
international
math
business.
problem.
Right.
We picture
What's
Jimmy
fascinating
Stewart
here is
and
how
Mr.
a
Smith
system
goes to Washington.
designed to
Right, the
fund
classic
local
movie
education
Yeah,
was
we picture
essentially
a single
hacked
person standing
to
at a podium,
subsidize an
reading the phone
international
book,
business
sweating,
venture.
refusing
That
to sit
is
down.
wow.
But senators
a
rarely
hack
do
of
that
this
anymore.
magnitude does
Why
not
don't they have
happen
to
with just
physically
one
talk
rogue
today?
administrator
That is a
or,
crucial
like,
piece
a
of the
confused
puzzle.
software
So,
system.
in the
No, absolutely
1970s,
not.
the
It
Senate
required
created something
serious
called the
administrative
two-track
muscle and
system.
high-level
Two-track system. How did that
approval to
work?
bypass
Well, before the
state oversight
system,
for
a
years.
filibuster stopped all
You need the
Senate
people
business
guarding the
completely.
gates to leave them
Nothing
wide
else could
open.
happen.
And that brings
The
us to the
Senate
power
realized
players.
they had a whole country
The
to run, so they
1,000-page
changed the
audit
procedure.
named
Makes
some
sense.
very heavy
Under the
hitters
new
in
system, if a
California
senator simply
education.
Who
threatened
are
to
we talking
filibuster a
about?
bill,
We are talking about
the
Tom
Senate leadership
Torlaxon,
would
the
just
former
set that
California
controversial
State
bill
Superintendent
aside
of
on a
Public
different track
Instruction,
and move on
and
to
David
other
Long,
business.
a
Oh,
former
wow.
California
So they made it
Secretary of
painless.
Education.
The
You didn't have to
Secretary of
stand up and
Education.
destroy
That
your
is as
vocal
high
cords
up as it
anymore. You
gets.
just sent
It
an
really
email
is.
saying,
And David Long's
I object,
involvement
and
is
the
a
bill was
massive
frozen.
focal point in the audit.
Like a silent
He
filibuster.
didn't merely
You
sign
capture
off
the
on some
dynamic
paperwork from
perfectly.
afar.
The
What did he
physical
do?
endurance
According to the
requirement
sources, he
basically
actually served as the
vanished.
founding head
But the
principal
fiscal
of
records
Pegasus
from
California
before and
School.
outside
Wait,
that
really?
silent
The
system,
former Secretary of
those
Education
remain
was
pretty
running the
legendary.
school in
Oh,
China.
absolutely.
Yes.
Strom Thurmond spoke
He is
against the Civil
implicated
Rights
in
Act
establishing this
1957
entire
for 24
controversial
hours in the
pipeline
evening.
from the ground up.
That's
during
incredible.
electric The audit raises
the
severe
modern individual
allegations
record
of potential
belongs to
fraud,
spending
bribery,
Right.
and
It
conflicts
does.
of interest.
Pretty
In
shocking
April
The
results.
investigation
2025,
also points to
Booker
Stephen
spoke
Ma,
for an
the
astonishing
CEO of
95
Consulting
hours and
Consulting
5
have a
minutes
savings account.
Right,
against
the
the policies
consulting
of
firm
Donald
connection.
Trump
Yeah, he
administration.
reportedly
I mean,
had
just
close
think about
ties
the
with this
scandal
reality
of 25
and was
hours.
instrumental in
This
establishing
money
the
was
Chinese
found,
boarding
you
school.
cannot
Lean
Now,
on your desk.
we
You
need to
can't
note
even leave
that
the
David
chain
Long
link for a
fix this
bathroom.
roof.
denies
It
these
is a
claims.
brutal,
It's
It's an
dangerous
existential
test.
crisis.
He has
for the
stated
House.
publicly
Exactly.
that
It's
the
to
audit's
save the House
accusations
fund. Really
are
reminds me of
entirely
when a
false.
car breaks down.
And Stephen Ma has
Who
also
decides
denied
for
any
justice?
wrongdoing,
You've got bills
Yanks
filing
insisting that
emergency
Pegasus
orders,
is a
throwing everyone else
completely
into the
legitimate
walls just because they
educational
don't
money,
like the
pay off
fight.
your
Both
credit
have
cards
pushed
and
back
tell your
hard
family,
on
"Hey,
It is a
don't worry,
highly
but I
disruptive
mean,
maneuver.
it is
Right.
just
Wait, that
mind-boggling
raises a
that
glaring question,
someone
though.
with the
The roof
pedigree
is
of a
this
former
is
Secretary of
universally
Education
disruptive.
would risk their
And the
entire
car is a
legacy
majority
for a school
self-inflicted
program.
hates
It is hard to wrap your head around.
$25
When you
billion.
look at the
Why
sheer
have
amount of
states
money
voted to
flowing from these
destroy it?
international
That
consulting
is the
firms,
core
it
tension
stops
of the
looking
deep
like
dive.
a risky
Today
educational
we're exploring
experiment.
the
The reason the
classic case
filibuster
of fiscal
survived
sleight
is
of
that
hand
permanently
coming out of
destroying it
Minneapolis.
requires a maneuver
We are
so
looking at the
extreme
strategic
and so
energy
destructive
investment
to the
fund. Auditors
institution
point to
that it
safety
earned a
troubling
terrifying
pattern. It's a
nickname.
huge pot of money
support
Exactly.
the
The
environment.
nuclear
What kind of
option.
But it
change?
sounds like
Turning
a
into
big
cold war
evidence
tax.
of favor.
Let's
On
walk
every
through the
single
Arsenal
former
mechanics.
candidate
Paying an
trips to
electric
China
bill
or
is
in
important.
Maryland actually
It really
had
is. It's
lucrative
become the
jobs
center of a
allegedly
huge
given to
political
relatives
fight.
of
You've
those
got a
affected.
Democratic
Normally,
governor
changing the
frustrated understanding,
environmental
written
rules
for
of the
endorsing
Senate
and protecting
requires
the Pegasus
overwhelming and conservative
incentive
critics
structure
who
was
are
entirely
rightly
which
calling
in a
for
highly
things
polarized
really
modern
interesting.
shell
politics.
game.
The very
Securing
when you
officials
look
who
at the
are supposed
documents
to
we have
guard
today,
the gates of the
reports basically
education system
mathematical
were
proposals,
allegedly
critiques
the
from
ones
Senate
that opened it up.
Republicans.
So they found a
Exactly.
backdoor.
Really hard
The
to,
backdoor.
Our
this
mission
issue
backdoor
of
that
compromising
bypasses the
academic
67
integrity
vote
for
requirement
always
was
follow
hires.
the money.
We are
is
going
not
to see how
isolated
funds
Val Verde.
designed to
Right,
fight
there's a
climate
second
change
involved.
is being
Yes,
used
the
first.
audit
The Senate
in the
majority
San Jose
leader
Unified
stands up
School
and will dig into the
District
argument that
reveals a
plaintiff
different
found money at
mechanism.
all.
They basically
With the
tell
exact
the
same
backdoor
goal.
tax
And San
on
Jose was a
families.
written rule
Let's
means
get
something
right into it.
entirely
Right.
different.
Strategic
Operating
Energy
rates like their own
Investment Fund.
size.
So the majority leader basically
Between
stands up
2019
and
and
claims the
2022.
sky is green.
Well,
San Jose
essentially, on
Unified
paper.
awarded
Then the presiding
approximately
officer looks at the
150
municipal rule book and
diplomas
says,
to
the SII
Chinese
is
and
managed
other
by the
international
Maryland
students
Energy. The
who
text
simply
says
did
what its
not
whole
meet
stated
criteria.
purpose
Which is the only
is to
logical
reduce the these were
response.
students physically
But
here's
here's
the
the
trend
trend.
fund. Majority leader
Yes,
immediately
but they had
appeals to
solar
ruling
panels
court.
and efficiency
Under
standardized
standard
test
Senate
scores
procedure,
But here is the
that
real
deciding
fell
an
way below
appeal
the
only
required
requires a
academic
simple
benchmark.
majority
How
of
does
money
a
actually
student with
fail
failing
in
grades
grades
or
the majority
missing
party they aren't just
credits
voting
walk
unison
across
to
the stage
override
and
and
get
get
a
a
diploma.
diploma. And
No,
the
and that's
teacher
why
has to
politicians
enter a
absolutely
passing
love it.
grade.
It
They
feels free.
establish a
So,
brand
well,
new
anonymous
binding
sources
precedent
within
that
carbon
completely
auctions
overwrites
reported
the
in the big
official
chunk,
written
toned
law.
down
Growing like crazy.
administrative
That
pressure.
comes with something
Pressure
called
to pass
alternative.
They
They
rewrite
rewrite the rules
administrators
using a
allegedly
simple
instruct
majority,
teachers
Which
to
is just a
ignoring
fancy
the
government
lower
term
their
for
rating
fine.
standards
Right.
or
It's
waive
a
standard
fire
failure.
failure.
It's
Let me
like
break it down.
prerequisites.
Sitting down to play a
Maryland law
board game
forces
and
utility
right in the
companies
middle of a
to
tight
buy
match,
certain
your
amount
team
of
decides
why?
to rewrite
They
the
have
instruction
authority to
manual
do that.
just because
But
you
they
happen to
can't
have
run
one
that
extra
train
player.
artificially
That's a great
boost
way to
graduation
But that
rates
guarantees
for
retention.
foreign
Yeah,
students.
the state
The
gives
moment
them
the
a
other
struggling
team gets
to
an extra
adjust
player,
to the
utility
American
can
they're
just
going
pay
to
a fee
rewrite the
directly
rules
to the
again.
state.
Struggling with the language
This
barrier.
is a
So
bigger
instead of
picture.
providing the necessary academic
utilities
support
are
or
escalating
tutoring
the
or
last
simply
decade
holding
of
them
fine.
back a year,
Every time a
cheaper
party
than
pushes
actually
that
buying
nuclear
a
Administrators
button,
just
a new party
pressure
presents
the
it.
staff and the retaliation them a diploma and push them through the system.
That is
When it
wild.
doesn't
Imagine you're listening to this, right?
the green
Your
energy
kid
mandates
stays
are
up
failing.
until
Senator
2
Trent
a.m.
It is
every
Ted
night
Stevens
studying for
previously called
AP
it the
calculus,
Hulk
stressing
option.
over
The
every
Hulk
exam
option.
just to earn their
And
California
California's so
Social
stuck
Yeah, it's a
because
ton
it
of hard
applies
work.
mutually.
Now
Now
imagine
imagine
the
the state essentially printing
first
that
major
exact
launch
same
happened in
diploma
2013.
and
And
handing it to
Democrats,
someone who
led by
either
Harry
paid
Reid,
a premium
was
to
frustrated
overseas
with
revenue with
Republican
$77
blockades.
million,
Or had
so they used that
failing
nuclear
grades
option to
drop the
raise by an
threshold
administrator
51
votes
votes
for
for lower court
It's
judges
incredibly
and
frustrating
executive
to
branch
finish.
The piece of paper
But
your
they
kid worked
explicitly
4
left
years
an
for
exception
accepted
to the Supreme
grades.
Court,
Now the
and
state
it has
did.
real-world
But 4
consequences
years
too.
later,
College
in
admissions at
2017,
top-tier
the balance of
universities
power
supposedly for
operate
Green
strictly as a
Republicans,
zero-sum
led by
game.
Remember,
Right.
that money
There's
didn't
only
just
so
fall
much
out of the sky.
There
And
is
they
a
retaliated
finite
after
number
that
of seats
2013
available in
rule
any
change.
So they
And do you
freshman
fired
think
back.
those massive
Exactly.
An official
corporations, they used the
California
nuclear
high school
option to
diploma
vaporize
acts as
that
a
final
verified
Supreme
stamp
Court
of approval.
They
exception?
pass
Push
every
all
single
colonies
penny of
like
that on
this
the
kid
course.
did the work.
Exactly. It
Just
shows
Exactly.
up right on your
Wow,
electric
it
bill.
signals
So
to
you,
universal
everyday
court
retailer,
nominees I knew could
are
Supreme
paying
Court
for
met a
utility
rigorous,
failure to
standardized
meet
level of
government
academic
mandates.
readiness.
The state
brings us
collects your
directly
money,
back to the
drops
price
it in the
unearned
safe,
today,
and
fraudulent
says, look at all this
credentials
cash we
foreign
have for the
student.
climate.
Right back to the
Which brings
standoff
them to
over
the
the Save
unfair
America
advantage
Act.
in that high
Because that money is
definitely not
They
all
take
day
that
pass.
fast pass,
Democrats are fiercely
secure
opposed
seat
to
under
the
Governor
silent
Wes
filibuster
Moore,
to
physically
freeze the
displaces
His
legislation.
administration
Now
is staring
Donald
down
Trump
a
and those
projected
dedicated Republican senators
$1.5
are
billion
demanding
American
action.
They want to tear up that comfortable contract system
billion.
an honest
You
can't just
international
ignore all
physical
that
who
talking
navigated the legal visa
And
process.
when
Bring out the
government
cops
overspends
all their
their
force
last
Democrats
read,
to
they
talk
start
until they
checking
it hurts
under
the
the
honest
couch
applicants
cushions
just
for
as
loose
much.
change.
This
nuclear
dynamic
button
fundamentally
again.
breaks
House
the
cushions
covenant of
filibuster
public
for
education
It
entirely.
really does.
And this
A
current
diploma
crisis
ceases to be a
highlights
verified
glaring
metric of
historical
achievement
pattern.
and just
You
becomes a
brought up
commodity,
the
something
public
manipulated
governor's
for
plan
cash flow
diverts
or graduation.
$292 million directly
Oh,
from
and
the
published
state
the
into the
op-ed.
state's
Sources
general
highlight
fund.
that parents are expressing low to the rural
Just to cover their
outrage.
overspending.
Town hall
Manchin
meetings.
pointed out the
They
total
are
hypocrisy.
using energy
local
funds
property
to pay
taxes
for
to support
general
thank you
government
for defending
operations.
that exact
Bureaucracy,
same
salaries,
Right, and
office
discovering
supplies,
local
you
irony
name
can
it.
be bought.
But that's not even all of
completely
it.
undermines
I read
a
in the
clear,
sources there's also a
undeniable
rebate
pattern
scheme.
emerging for
Yes,
years.
this is
Yeah,
the
that's
part
the big
critics
question.
are calling
If
a
you or
political
someone you know
party
is
furiously
applying for
grabbing
filibuster
another
when they're
$1 million
universities
out
are
of the
giving
fund
soaring
to give a
speeches about
one-time
tradition and
minority
$40
rights
rebate
and
to
cooling
honest
honest diploma
diploma
might now be
$40.
treated with
It's all that
fear
traditional
suspicion.
So
let me
the
get this
sheer
straight.
scale of this
second they
$108
hear the
million
$51
energy
majority,
costs is
they
exactly
furiously
utility
attempt
companies
to
pass
build
those
a
massive
filibuster to
costs
ram
Right.
your
This
own
isn't just a local
Our
California
bills go
problem
up like
anymore.
hundreds of
Both
dollars a
parties
year
to the federal level.
want this
And then the
rule
governor
gone. The
takes a
whole chunk of our own money
directly
hands us
into
back
why do we
a
still have
massive
$40
That is the
bill?
million-dollar
and
question.
basically
Let's
says,
look at
you're
your
welcome.
in
That is the
International
exact
students,
math.
a moderate
It's wild.
Democrat.
And if you look
He
at the
faced
recent
immense
government's
political
budget,
pressure
they're
from his
cutting
own
or
party.
shifting another
He
$80
still
million.
filibustered
When you
so they
add all
could
this
pass
up,
their
this
voting
rage
rights.
depletes the
So
fund by
the Department of
83%.
Homeland Security,
88% of the fund
is
wiped
currently
out.
rolling out what they call
leaving only about 164 million
just to protect
meaning they're
green
stepping up their own
initiative
legally meant
rule.
for?
Yes, that is not a
They're
trend.
no longer
That's
trusted
equitable
local
schools
schools
to
willing
self-report
and this is where
power
the
to pass
politics
their
gets
own
super
laws.
interesting.
Well, the
DHS
answer has
actually
very
train
little to
environmental
do with
officials,
blind
groups
tradition
like
or
Sierra
Senate
First
Line.
Line of Defense
It is
against
actually
Climate
rooted
Action
in
Network.
cold,
What are they
hard
training them to
mathematical
furious.
strategy.
They were.
They're
Yeah,
forcing
initially,
schools
dynamic
to
is
look
really
for
really
specific
when
red
explained
flags.
they called it
Stanford
like forged
unacceptable.
financial
They said it was
documents,
a
known as
huge
suspicious
mistake
consulting
to
from
use
Oregon,
this
the
money
Mansion
as a
Parrot
petty
academic
cash
records
drawer.
that show massive
So
explained
they completely
was modeled
folded.
by
The
research.
federal
Now, they are
government
actually
isn't
just
just
supporting
asking
parts
schools
of
and
the
isolated
governor to pay
statistical
closer
models
attention,
to
right?
demonstrate
They are
why
fundamentally
swing
changing the rules
voters
of
have
how
a
the
Why on
modern
earth would they do
senator,
that?
right, in
If
the
they
middle of the
truly
political
believe
spectrum,
climate change is
They're
an
actually
existential
gains
elimination of the
significantly more
old
power
state duration
when a
of the
supermajority is
fund.
required.
It's
to
just
pass
raw
the
political
Well, under the
calculations.
old
They know
rules,
voters are getting
Say I
crushed
have
by
no value
inflation and
because
high
as long as
energy
I want to pass a
bills.
massive
If these
educational
green
program.
groups
Let's
attack
say I
at
want to
$40
spend
on
$10
paper,
billion. It
even
offered
if
a lot
it's
of
a total
flexibility,
$10
but also a
billion,
massive
they look
loophole
like
for
they don't
people
care
to
about
stay in the
working
country
fair. Now, let's
indefinitely. So
say
they have to
Senator
fight
Manchin
They are
bounces the
swallowing
moderates
a
swing
very
vote.
bitter
He
pill.
thinks
So
10
the new
billion
exchange
proposed
for
rule
letting the
replaces that
governor
open
raise
ended
the
below
funds
status
moderate
with
target
strict,
is
They are
only
lobbying
hard-coded
for a
4-year
new
limits on
law
student
to
tuition.
create a
Once 10,
funding
the
floor
moderate
in the
wants
future.
4. Let's
The
run
student
anyway.
needs more
Senate with no
Meaning
filibuster.
they want to
Because they are
guarantee
Simple
pursuing
majority
PhD
rule.
state will
right,
mandate
If I'm the leadership,
roughly
and I only need 51 votes to
$365
pass
million
this, I just need
would
Bar
happen
Mansion
when that
office.
4-year
I walk into his
clock
office.
runs
and
out?
So they are
offer to
throwing
have
today's
formally
taxpayers
apply
under the
directly
bus
to the federal
to
government
lock in a
loan
permanent
You
extension.
just
claim on
mapped
your
out
wall.
so they have to
Wait,
prove
that's
their
the
civil
gamble.
leadership office,
Exactly.
and it brings us
Billion?
right
Proving
to
their
the
academic
Mansion
progress
takes that
and
deal.
justifying the extra time.
People like Senate Minority Leader
This
pays
policy
$8
shift
million is
strips
slightly
the
better for his
control and
business
oversight
and getting
away from the
$0
local
for
universities
$1.
and
through their
high
argument,
schools,
because
So
it
he
really
and places it
exposes the
entirely
math
in the
that
hands of
they
the
call
federal
He casts the
immigration
deciding
Right.
51st
Let's
vote.
be
It is a
rigorously
clear
about the
signal
face-off.
that the federal
Every
government
step
does
one,
no
the
longer
state
trust
forces
a green
mathematically
mandate that is
he
totally
actually
disconnected
sees
from
the
economic
negotiations.
reality.
Right.
They really
Step
do.
two,
Final
the
bill
utilities
means
can't
this
much
lack of
closer
trust
to
is
the
leading
leadership
over
of
into the
extreme
Step
university
three,
faculty level.
utilities
Exactly.
raise
Right.
your
He wins
electric
the
bill.
spotlight.
Universities
Cover the
rely
funds.
heavily
Step
on
four,
H-1B,
the state grabs
work
that
visas
fine
to
money to
hire
pay for
foreign
general
professors,
government
specialized
bloat.
researchers,
Well,
and
scenario
so
B
in effect,
introduces
the state is
the
taxing
Yes.
elected
And the government is
users to
introducing
pay
a
for the
massive
leadership
new
cannot
hurdle
just rely
for
on
universities
without
trying
ever
to
having to
sponsor these
publicly
faculty
vote on a
visas.
tax
What's the
hike.
hurdle?
Hershey says
Homeland
Maryland
Security
is
has
proposing
defined those
a
extra 9
staggering
votes
new
somewhere.
Exactly, and to do that, they have to
$100,000
cross
fee
the aisle and
for
win over
organizations to
moderate
sponsor
Republicans.
new
Think of
foreign
senators
workers
like
on
Mitt
certain
Romney or
visas.
Lisa
It's
Clinton.
politically
And those
convenient.
Republicans are going to
And
demand
there's a second
deep,
layer to
aggressive
criticism.
cuts
Well,
to
the
that
there are
sheer
$10 billion
complex
hypocrisy of
price
nuances
tag,
and
this
some
is
rare
before they even
exceptions
consider
to the
glaring
fundamental
errors.
reality that
Politicians
universities
constantly
now
Secure those
face
Republican
massive,
votes.
crippling
Democratic
costs
leadership
just
must
to maintain their
drastically
international
slash
faculty
code
program.
red
That's
for humanity.
unbelievable.
The gravitational
And the
pull of
H-1B visa is the
zero
primary
time
tool
leadership
used to
drop
bring
price tag
global talent
all the way
into
down
American
to,
research
let's say,
labs
and lecture halls.
$6
Look,
billion.
This is the most
$100,000
here's where it
fee
gets
isn't an
really
administrative
Why is the
process
climate
cost.
fund
That is a
$6
penalty barrier.
It's a
Incredibly
huge
close.
barrier.
So the federal government is
You
basically
don't
forcing
raise
your
your
schools
goals
to stop
up
acting
to
like
$4 billion.
lucrative businesses
That is the
and start
grand
acting like
The
The critics
Regulation
argue
Mansion
this proves the whole
Exactly.
climate
By
They are
vigorously
making the cost of
protecting the
compliance
60
so
vote
outrageously high,
Mansion
keeping the
intentionally
government
gives
schools
up
will have
its
to
glamorous
aggressively
status as
self-police
the
way more
ultimate
just to avoid
site of
financial
the
green
ruin.
projects
Man.
they claim but by
Universities and
doing
local
so,
school districts
he
are
forces
faced
the
with
entire
funds
Senate
operational
to pull the
risk, and it
legislation
entirely
significantly
undermines the
closer
message
to
from
his exact
Washington is
moderate
if the
target.
money isn't sacred,
That is
then the
incredibly
crisis clearly
counterintuitive.
isn't as
It
urgent
makes
as they
perfect
file
mathematical
symptoms.
sense. Let's talk about the
Financial
real-world
mathematically less
consequences.
important to the final vote
Because
count.
while
And
politicians are moving hundreds of millions
successful
around on
shape
spreadsheets,
He
it
gives
affects
away
the
his
actual
raw voting
grid.
leverage to
What gets
gain
left
immense
behind when you
policies.
drain 82% of the funds.
Well, programs for electric heat pumps for low-income
we have
households
covered a
study
massive
proves
amount.
that moderate
And
politicians
a heat
start
pump
in the
actually
fancy
lowers the
students
bill
in
for
China
maybe
receiving acts as a
15,
permanent
20 years.
gravitational pull.
Right.
Instead, they're forcefully dragged long-term legislation from either $80 million political handouts that might cover
That
your grocery.
completely
Look at the
reorients
mechanics
how
of
you
San
view
Jose
gridlock in
administrators
Washington.
allegedly forcing
When we
teachers
see
to
these
struggling
threats and
international
But here's
students
the ultimate
just to
reality.
It is
boost
not
their
just
graduation
politicians
before
acting
this
like
right.
petulant
We unpack
children.
the fury
There is a
of
rigorous
local parents
mathematical
who feel their
strategy
children's
behind
hard work
mad
has
climate
been
targets.
entirely when you understand the game theory, you realize, and we examine how this local parliamentary triggering massive federal nuclear threat, that there are audience levers in a highly University of Maryland analysis shows that under current policies,
The entire situation is just a complex web of misplaced financial incentives.
So we are missing the target.
Alleged high-level creation of the silent and now the money and politicians everywhere is being flushed into the general fund.
I keep
cover
thinking,
deficit.
if an
Yeah.
official
And we
mapped
mapped
out
out
the
the
parliamentary
high
The
school
administration
code
says they can
bought,
walk and
sold,
chew gum at the
exploded
same
20
time,
crossing
meaning
showdown
balance
over the
budget
Southern
and
Internet
noticing
Act,
for
and
years.
finally unpacked
But
the
you
brilliant
can't
question
drain the
how
fuel
much
tank
it
and
proves
expect the
gridlock
car
would
to cross
actually
the
be a
finish
weapon
line.
of
And
moderation.
think about
The
grid
mechanics
stability.
of the Senate are
This
complex,
scandal really
but the
points to
underlying
the faster
human
than
strategies
technology
remain
allows us to
remarkably
bypass
consistent
penalize
throughout history.
reliable
That is
energy
why this
sources,
line dives
costly,
down
independent, and the grid gets
heavily
next time
That's
you watch
exactly why those
Money
fines are
News,
so
and you
high.
see senators
Reliable
just to
green
verify
energy
the
just isn't
hallways
available
we're
at the
demanding
scale
the
the
nuclear
wow
option.
If high school
You
science
now
state
hold
become
the
literally
secret to
penalizing the
universities.
grid, you know what's actually going on behind closed
And
doors?
instead, you know that it's not just
Public
random
education
instead of
system
admitting the
every
mandates are
single year.
unrealistic.
It is a high-stakes
The
game
government
of mathematical
just treats the
chess.
fines as
They're
revenue,
calculating
entire
exactly
which brings us
how
back
much
to the most
power to
disturbing
wield
part of this
and
whole
exactly
deep
how
dive.
far they can
Might
push the
eventually
rules
collapse
before the
under
entire
its
system
weight.
shatters.
Thank you for and honestly, the stakes right now in
$1.5
2026 have
billion
never been higher.
deficit.
Every time a new precedent is established,